Speaking to Sky's Joey Jones.
Well, I've come to Swindon specifically because, of course, this is where David Cameron launched the Conservative Party manifesto. Clearly, we had terrible results in Scotland, and we've got to do better in Scotland if we want to win next time. But the failure in Scotland was, of course, compounded by our defeat in England. There were 80 Conservative-facing marginal seats that we were targeting, and we got a net gain of just 4. We, in fact, lost 2 of the 10 seats in the 3 southern regions of England that we won in 2010. So it's in England that David Cameron found his majority, and it's essentially in England that we found a situation where government was out of sight for the Labour Party. Now, my view is that we should have no cap on our ambitions as a party. Here in Swindon, we should be going for both the seats that we were targeting last time, and we should be doing that in all parts of the country, north, south, east, west. And so I've come to announce today that I will stand as a candidate. I wanted to do so deliberately out of London because we not only need to do well in London, but we've got to do well in the whole of the country.
How do you prevent, as a party, this leadership election being the site of Labour descending into old divisions and recriminations?
Well, we've got to completely junk some of these labels that have been bandied around in the media, Blairites, Brownites. That is in the past. I've always been constantly asked, what label are you? And I said it's completely irrelevant to the new generation of people, both in the sign, the chat to the dustbin. And really the challenge for us, I think we've got 3 big challenges as a progressive party. How do we deliver progressive values in a fiscally cold climate when government doesn't have so much money? How do we continue to build the fair and more equal society we want to see when technology is disrupting so much of what we do? Now, it's creating lots of opportunities, but it's destroying jobs that people in many parts of the country have been doing for generations. And how do we pay our way in the world? Now, if we're to tackle these new challenges, the task that we have, in some senses, is that John Prescott used to talk about, is how do you apply our traditional progressive values in this different setting? And I don't think replaying the old tunes of the past is the way. What we want to do is take what we did in the past that was successful forward and come up with new solutions for the new challenges I've just set out that we face, looking forward in the future. So no more Blairites, no more Brownites. We're one Labour Party. And I'm looking forward to this contest because I think it's a great time for us to actually have a debate about how we win in 2020. And make no mistake about it, we've got a big challenge. We are going to need to win back, I think, at least 90 seats. We're going to need to make at least 90 gains. We've, of course, got to do better in Scotland if we want to win again. I'm absolutely confident that we can do that. I don't buy this notion that somehow this is the beginning of a 10-year project. We've got to do this in 5 years. We owe it to the communities who have already been hit very hard by the last Tory-led coalition, and we know will be hit even harder by this David Cameron-led pure Tory government.
You know that your colleagues up and down the country, including here in Swindon, are reeling at the scale of the defeat. They want some answers as well as some of the questions that you're raising.
Yeah.
What do you think in the campaign went right and what went wrong?
I think actually Ed had a cracking campaign. He grew in stature during the campaign. We ran a positive, optimistic campaign. Not only did we, of course, point out what 5 more years of Conservative government would mean, and I really fear for the people of our country when I reflect on what that's going to mean now, but we also did put forward a positive agenda for the future. But I think there are undoubtedly a number of things that we need to get right, which wasn't just relative to the actual general election campaign itself, but if you look at our 5 years in opposition, which is we need to talk to people's desire to get on and do well, their aspirations. And that actually, by the way, I mean, it's often talked about in terms of Middle England, so to speak. I actually think that aspiration goes all the way down the salary spectrum from somebody on a low-income job right through to somebody on a higher salary job. And I think people didn't hear enough from us about that, and I think all of us in the front line, we bear a responsibility for that. I think also, and I've always argued this, the clue is in the name with the Labour Party. We're the party of work. We're the party of those who put in the effort and do the work, and we want to ensure that everybody's got a good job, that is secure, and that pays a wage that you can live off and is fulfilling. But you can't be pro good work, good jobs unless you're going to back the wealth creators who create them. And I think although our policy agenda was absolutely spot on in terms of backing them and helping them, it was here in Swindon actually that I came with Ed Balls to announce that we would ensure that the tax burden for small businesses, for example, would be lower in the next Parliament under a next Labour government than under the Tory government. Although we had the right policy agenda, sometimes those guys didn't really feel we were on their side. And we've got to get that right next time. And I also think in relation to the competence issue, the economic competence issue in particular, of course we shouldn't have run an albeit small and historically unremarkable deficit. But the idea that this led to a global financial crisis is absolutely absurd and ludicrous. And frankly, we inherited a debt to GDP ratio of about 42%. We reduced it to 37% before the crash, but of course we had the crash. Now, should we have better regulated the banks? Of course. But I think in many respects we should have talked about that more and defended our record more, but also being clear that there's a very progressive social democratic case for balancing the books, which is I don't like the fact that we spend more on paying off our debt interest than we do on housing, than we do on transport every year. So those are just some of the things that I think we need to get right and we need to do in the future.
Joey Jones putting the questions there. You can see a full version of that interview online, of course. Let's turn to Sky's Anushka.